A few years ago, I uploaded a video about how surprisingly simple and user-friendly it's become to install your own hardware mods to modernize the Game Boy Advance with a backlit screen. And since then, I've been recollecting a lot of my childhood favorites from that generation. Now, in my mind, GBA games are dirt cheap and should be a super affordable collection to rebuild. And that's mostly true. You can find a ton of listings for used games for 99 cents or less online, but do you really want to play DreamWorks Madagascar on the Game Boy Advance?
No.
If we search for a game you'd actually want to own and check the going rate in 2023.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
It's time we stop thinking of this platform as disposable. This is real money. Whether you're a collector looking to expand your library, or you just want to know if you have a potential gold mine in your junk drawer, stick around. We've got a lot to talk about. Okay, first and foremost, why are Game Boy Advance games getting expensive? I guess technically it's not just the GBA, though they do tend to pull higher numbers than Game Boy and Game Boy Color games on average, putting aside cases like Kid Dracula where the game is just absurdly rare. GBA games are in the unfortunate Venn diagram of being far removed from their original production dates, being physically very small so they're easy to lose, and here's the kicker, being the last Nintendo game format that was sold in cheap, thin, disposable cardboard boxes. Starting with the DS and GameCube, Nintendo started producing every game they made in hard plastic cases meant to store and protect the game long term. The GBA was offered no such luxury, and so day by day, more of them are just going missing. Be honest here, if you own GBA games, where are they right now? At the bottom of a drawer? Mixed in with a bunch of cables and other random crap? Mine are. Where else are you going to keep them? Please God, don't tell me you're using a Ziploc bag. Even if you aren't interested in maintaining a collection of your own, listing a GBA game with a custom box of some sort immediately raises its value online and would get you a bigger payout from the sale. People know there is no official way to store and protect these things, so they're willing to pay a premium to have that covered for them, especially if the storage solution looks good on a shelf. But as we've established, GBA retail boxes were disposable and are thus extremely rare these days, especially in good condition. So if you aren't a weirdo who has kept all of your cardboard from the last 2 decades in a clean room, what are you supposed to do now? Let me introduce you to thecoverproject.net. If you've never heard of this site, it's essentially a host for scans of every original box of every video game you can possibly think of. There are usually multiple variations for each game, formatted to fit everything from cases for DVDs to audio cassettes, which in this case includes the original plastic boxes Nintendo made for the DS, which, if you recall, have a slot for a GBA game in the top. If you can get your hands on a sizable number of empty DS game cases, you can print off your own box art from the cover project on a normal 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper and make your own GBA box for free. I have no DS, so to start off I purchased a lot of 31 empty cases on eBay for $21, which is less than $1 per case. This is actually a much worse deal than it sounds, which we'll get into a bit later. But regardless, even if this was a total failure, I was only out 21 bucks. Finding these sorts of lots at a good price is really just a matter of luck. There are sellers out there that collect, clean, and resell DS game cases for this exact purpose, but buying them this way is way more expensive than just finding a person cleaning out their closet. DS game cartridges are also extremely tiny and easy to lose, so there are a ton of people with boxes for sale simply because they no longer have games to put in them, which was exactly the case with this seller. 2 weeks later, I had a package at my door, and it was time to investigate exactly what it was that I'd purchased. And let me tell you, we got some real classics here, folks. You of course have your lovely Lisa, and Jeff Foxworthy's magnum opus, Are You Smarter Than a 5th Grader? The original owner must have been absolutely devastated by losing that one. Then we've got Dora Puppy, and not Dora and her puppy, not even Dora and Puppy, just Dora Puppy. I guess it's a good thing that show taught kids Spanish and not English. Okay, yeah, so these games are all ass, and that's why the boxes are worthless. But products that are low value also tend to not have been cared for very well, and that is certainly the case here. These boxes are all scratched and dirty, but many of them also have massive gashes in the plastic, or the internal latch is broken off so they don't close correctly. But that's only half the reason why my 31 cases suddenly became a lot less than 31. Starting on November 14th of 2010, with the release of Mario vs. Donkey Kong Mini Land Mayhem, Nintendo switched to producing eco-friendly game cases for the DS, which included a cutout behind the manual in the shape of the recycling symbol, and, as you may notice, the removal of the GBA cartridge slot at the top. Whenever you buy a random lot of DS game cases like this, you're rolling the dice on how many of these eco-friendly versions you're going to get, which, for storing GBA games, are completely useless and, ironically, wastes of plastic.
Really sorry. I didn't realise that it was... I'm sorry.
Why are you laughing? It's not a funny situation.
About 10 or so of my cases ended up being this type, so a third of my 31 were already out, no matter if they were in good condition or not. But my GBA collection was still relatively small, so I was willing to make do with a few scratch boxes as long as the GBA cartridge slot was intact. In terms of printing the box labels, that was actually the easiest part by far. First, you start by going to the coverproject.net, selecting your console in the sidebar, and then finding your game alphabetically. Then you'll get a list of images pre-formatted to fit certain cases. Download the one you like, print it off, and you're done. DS game cases and DVD cases like the ones used by the PS2 and GameCube are all exactly 11 inches wide when folded open, meaning that they are the perfect size for an 8.5 by 11 sheet of computer paper, though be aware that you will be losing a little bit on the extreme edges when you trim, due to the print area limitations of your specific printer. If you need your labels to fit in the case perfectly, you'll have to get them professionally printed to be exactly 11 inches wide. Speaking of the PS2 and GameCube, there's no reason you can't follow this same exact process to replace lost or damaged cases from other consoles beyond the Game Boy line. For example, check out this label to store and display the Game Boy Player disc in a full-size GameCube game case, something Nintendo themselves never manufactured. Spend some time on the site. You might be surprised by the amount of custom work people have made, all free to download and use how you like. The labels fit perfectly, the games fit perfectly. Problem solved. End of the video, right? Well, it would be, if I weren't a freak that was collecting all of the manuals too. The game manuals for the GBA are rectangular, making them too long to fit vertically or horizontally in a DS game case without modifications. Cutting into the bottom left corner of the case to give the manual space to sit horizontally would destroy one of the latches needed to keep the case closed, so that's a no-go. The only option is to remove this plastic bar along the top to the length that manuals are tall, and then store them vertically. First, I marked the appropriate length with a knife, and then used a Dremel to carve out the plastic and make room for the manual, which, as you might imagine, is extremely messy and takes quite a long time. What you're left with is a very rough and obviously unprofessional mod to your game's case, but it does allow for the manual to fit tightly and securely inside. Once the manual is in place, it hides all the shock and horror of what's behind it, and looks fantastic. So I guess it's up to you if such a modification would allow you to sleep at night. So with my GBA collection safely stored, manuals and all, looking great on a shelf, etc., would I do this again? Well, no I wouldn't. I mean, sure, if you already have the GBA games, already have a ton of empty DS game cases that have the GBA cartridge slot, and aren't interested in keeping any of the manuals, by all means, just go to the cover project, print out some labels. But for everyone else, let me introduce you to the UK-based company Retro6. Retro6 produces third-party tools, parts, accessories, pretty much everything you can think of for retro consoles in the modding scene. But they also manufacture their own custom game case specifically for games in the Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance line. If you don't mind spending a bit more cash, a readily available solution already exists through what they call their universal game cases. They are a bit more expensive per unit than buying random lots of DS game cases from eBay, but they'll be brand new, and you'll know exactly how many you're getting. I reached out to Retro6 to ask if they were okay with me mentioning their product in this video, and not only did they say yes, but they sent me 30 of their universal game cases at no charge to replace the ones I thought I was getting from the eBay listing. Really just cool people over there, to be honest. My first impressions were that they definitely feel like a third-party case and not something manufactured by Nintendo, but wow are they close. Holding a DS-sized game case this new and shiny is kind of a surreal experience in a way. And just by looking, I don't think you'd be able to tell one apart from the other if it weren't for the tiny engraved Retro6 logo on the spine. Inside, they are capable of holding a Game Boy, Game Boy Color, or Game Boy Advance game in the one slot with no modifications, and they also already have room to hold a rectangular Game Boy Advance manual, either vertically or horizontally. Everything just fits. I don't know what else to tell you, it all just fits perfectly. If you're interested in buying a few for yourself, or anything from Retro6's site, they also gave me a discount code to offer. Using the code Phobia at checkout will give you 10% off anything site-wide for your first order. Or you could say screw Retro 6, buy a Dremel instead and do it yourself. It makes no difference to me. I just wanted to share the available options and what I learned from my own journey of trying to make cases for my own personal use. Either way, whether you're trying to protect games you already own, want to expand your collection, or just want to add some additional value to a game you're selling online, put them in a case.